Okay, so I'm gonna run through this message board app real quick, or as quick as possible. We're gonna be using the Airtable, we're gonna be using Firebase, and we're gonna be connecting those things to our app here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to drag in two invisible components, Airtable and sign-in. They can be found under the data components. Just drag and drop the Airtable, drag and drop the sign-in under authentication, and once you have this, you'll want to make sure your Firebase settings are set up. So we're going to be looking for the API key and database URL. So we're going to go over to Firebase. You'll set up your account. You'll have this project overview screen, and you will go to authentication. You'll set that up. Sign-in method, make sure it's enabled for email password. Templates, this is going to be the email address verification. You can modify that a little bit. And that's the email they're going to get when they sign up for the verification process. And then over here in the real-time database, you'll make sure this is enabled, and you'll make sure that read and write are set to true. So the code looks like this, so that our app is able to read and write information in this database. And we are going to go over to project settings up here to get our API and our database URL. We're going to copy this API key in here, and we're going to go back to our app. We're going to paste that right there. We're going to take our database URL, we're going to copy that, and we're going to put that right there. And now we are connected to Firebase. Now this works for mobile and web browsers. The only disadvantage of Airtable here is that this only works primarily for the web browser. So when it comes to pulling the information and writing the information that we're going to be dealing with, it will not work on the mobile app as far as I'm concerned with Airtable. But it is a little bit of a more basic method, and it also is able to update in more real time, I've found, as opposed to Firebase. I was having a couple issues with that. Airtable, very simple, very straightforward, easy to get your mind around the whole reading and writing of databases. It's just a simple Excel spreadsheet. You can change, you can add columns, change the names, email, username, have different tables. This is messages, usernames. We also have replies that I was going to use, but not going to use that today. And so we've got this set up. We make sure your authentication is working, right? And that will give us a good way to start this off. So add a couple text inputs: email, username, password, submit button, back button, label to let everyone know what's going on. I also added a loading icon, which is invisible right now because this whole process may take a few seconds. So submit button. When that's clicked, we're going to go ahead and enable the loading icon, let everyone know that it's working. We're going to use from Airtable, set the table name to usernames. We're going to find that here. Just set that table there. Make sure that we're using usernames, because this is where we want to write the information. We're going to want to link the email to the username, have that go in the same row, and that's going to match up with the authentication process in Firebase. The reason we're doing that is so that when they log in with their email through the authentication, it will automatically grab their username. So they won't have to remember their username, they won't have to log in with the username, but they'll be able to post messages on the message board without showing their email address. So once submit button click, we're going to go ahead and go into the Airtable and make sure we create a row. And it's going to require that we have an object. We're going to create object. We're going to want to drag out two fields to match our columns. We're going to get the text from the email sign up and the username. In both those inputs, we're going to make sure these fields match up with the columns in our Airtable database. And this is going to be username. Let's make sure that matches up. Email, username, good to go. And when create row is done, then we will go ahead and call the sign up process. You could probably do this either way. If you wanted to include an error code, if an email user is already signed up, you might want to switch this out, switch this around, put this first, Airtable second. It doesn't really matter unless you're getting more advanced into it. And then we're going to go ahead and include some cosmetic stuff to let them know that the process is underway and completed. Set the label to thank you for signing up. From username, get text, make it a little bit personal. Let them know they should receive an email shortly to verify. So one thing to note about the Firebase authentication is that it's going to need a 6-character password. So just might want to include that there, so people, otherwise it's going to give you an error, which can be displayed by throwing in an if-else statement under the sign-up process. Again, this should probably happen here. Rearrange that a little bit. If error, then we'll go ahead and set the label to whatever the error is, and so that will give us let's see, the email address is badly formatted, so it's not going to accept that. Password should be at least 6 characters, and that's also good for troubleshooting if you're ever having problems or errors or something isn't working. You can just set the label to the error to understand what the authenticator, what kind of error code it's throwing. But let's go ahead and test this out. That shouldn't have made anything. Okay, good. Okay, so let's go ahead and see if this will work. Okay, and as you could see, it took, a second or two, so that loading symbol helps. And we have our email and username associated together in one single row. And let's refresh our server right there, the authentication, and we have our email. We have a user ID, but of course we can't see the password. We can reset, disable, delete, and that's about it. So let's move on to the sign in screen here. So getting the sign in screen set up, we have a few fields: email, password, login, label. And so what we're going to want to go ahead and do is, when login is clicked, first of all, this whole process will take a few seconds, so we're going to want to set the loading icon to visible, set the label to authenticating, letting them know the process is underway. We're going to call the sign in process here. We're going to get the email, we're going to get the password, and if there is an error, then we're going to make sure to set the label to the error and set the just cosmetic, the loading icon, to false, make that disappear. So if there's an error, they're going to know exactly what it is, and otherwise, if there isn't, then we're going to go ahead and move forward with the process of getting the column and turning that into a list, so we're able to identify their username from the column associated with their email. So we're going to be pulling email, the email column here in usernames. We're going to be seeing what is associated with this email, what the row ID is, and thus we are going to need a couple lines of a couple variables. We're going to need the user ID, we're going to need the user ID list, and we're going to need the user ID index. So we're going to set the user ID to a blank text. That's going to be the username that we're grabbing. We're going to set the user ID list to an empty list, and we're going to set the user ID index to 0. That's going to be the row number that they're in. this is going to be the list made from the column of usernames, and there we go. Or from the email, sorry. So we're going to take this, we're going to set the app variable user ID list to the column. We're going to set our text to synchronizing, letting them know we're looking for their username. The cosmetic stuff there, set some stuff to disappear, and I like to wait a second. And if we're going to add an if-else statement, if the user ID list contains the email that they entered, then if that's true, we're going to go ahead and set the user ID index to the index, or it's going to return the index of the first occurrence that it finds the match. And that's going to return, in other words, that's going to give us the row number that they are located in. So this is going to be row 1. And once we have the row number, or the user ID index, we're going to attach that to the get cell process here. And again, we're going to be looking in column username this time. So we're going to be looking in the row username, so we're going to find the username. And then we're going to set the user ID to the value that it returns in that column, in that row, which is going to be their username. And you get these actions here, these events. Through Airtable. You can get column, get cell. There. So this is how it should look. And let's go ahead and test this out. We'll know if that's working. And there's also an else statement here. For our purposes, it's not going to throw anything else because this will indeed equal this. If not, you could add in an error statement letting them know that there's something wrong. But if there were to be any error, chances are it would occur right here with the sign-in process. Because if they have an email with the authenticator and it's valid, then obviously, unless we went in and manually deleted it, it's going to be in our system in the Airtable. So let's go ahead and see how this works. And we're looking for the app variable user ID, which should be Steven0118. There we go. So it worked, it pulled the information, it signed in, and now it has assigned that as my username, which I will use to post in the next on the home screen. Okay. Now, once we get to the home screen, we're going to go ahead and set up a few things here. We're going to have a couple components. We're going to add let's add a label. Let's add a text input, 2 text inputs, 2 labels, 1 button. And what we're going to go down, most important thing here is going to be the data viewer list. We're going to add that. We're going to put this bad boy on the bottom. We're going to put the button on the bottom. Rearrange this a little bit. This can just say, oh, we're actually going to add a, 1 second. We're going to add a couple rows, make sure this is formatted nicely. Okay. Add some spacing here. But not everything is crammed together. That should be good there. This is going to be our post title. This is going to be our actual message. This is going to be our greeting, or that's going to be just the message board label. We're just going to have that say message board. We're going to go ahead and add this as the personalized greeting. So that's going to, and yes, we're going to make it so that you can reply to individual messages on the message board when you click on them. So now we can go ahead and get into the data side of the block side of things. We're going to go ahead and do a couple of things. One thing, what we want to do is when the home screen opens, we want to make sure to set our Airtable table name to messages, because we're no longer using the username. We have that assigned to the variable, and now we're going to be looking at the messages, and we're going to have a couple columns in here you're going to want to add in the Airtable. The first column, or second technically, is going to be the username. We have our post title, we have our notes, that's going to be the actual message. It's a multi-line column, and we have our date formatted as such. We have our time. We also have replies. So you're going to want to add those in by going here. Most of them are going to be single line text besides the message, and the date can be formatted as that. Make sure that's all good there. And we're going to set our greeting label, make that a little bit personal. We're going to join here. We're going to say we're going to find that variable user ID, so that'll be a nice personalized greeting to them when they see that. We're going to initialize a couple variables, and you will see why. We're going to initialize 5 variables here on this screen. Oops. And they will all be text. So we're going to have our username. We're going to be having our time, because we want to timestamp it along with the date. Message, and then we want to have the post title. And we're going to make sure that all of these are set to blank text. And then we're going to go through, and we have our submit button. Yes, we do. We're going to post that. Post. And so what this is going to do is when they click the post button, they have their title typed in, and we also want to add 2 things in order to get the time and date and to timestamp that. We're going to scroll down, and we are going to throw in a date input as well as a time input. Put that up there. give that some spacing. So when post button click, we're going to go ahead and create a row in our data table here. We can go ahead and delete all of these records. I was testing it previously. So we're going to go into our air table. We are going to go ahead and create a new row. And remember, we're working off the messages table, so it already knows that. Our row object is going to consist of not all of these variables, but theoretically all their variables. That's going to be for a different reason. So right now we're going to go in, we're going to create the object. We're going to create 5 fields that we're going to want to put in here. The first one being the actual message. That's going to be the notes. And then we're going to want to do the usernames. I think that's with an S. Yes, it is. So we have notes, usernames, post title, date, and time. Date, time, post title. Yep. Okay, so we are going to then get the text from message input. We'll go ahead and add that to the notes. Record as such. We're going to grab our variable user ID. Remember, that hasn't changed. It's going to be their username. Date is going to be the. We'll get that right here. Where is that? Call get date. Yeah, there we go. We're going to get date, and we're also going to get the time. It's weird because it doesn't look like that, but that's what it is. Okay, so that works perfectly. Text input for the post title. Let's find that. Title input. Get text. And I like to throw in a confirmation, let them know that this is posted. So we can throw in an alert there. Call that the confirm alert. And once they do that, we will call show once that's done. Again, you can code this a little bit more. For the real world, if there were an error, you could have that show with an if-else statement. Right now, we're just doing this. This will just say scroll down to see your post. And then as soon as that is done and they hit confirm, we're going to want to refresh the data so that they will be able to see it live. And now going into the data list viewer component here, we're going to add a data source, and we're going to click on our linked cloud taker. Remember, we dragged in the invisible component, so that's already in there. We're using table 1, I guess is what it was imported as, but that's just going to be the messages. We want to just do the title, so we're going to set it here, and we're going to get title property from the post title column. So all you will see there is the title. And we are going to make it so that you can click on that and check out what message they posted. But for right now, let's go ahead and see if all this information updates. Let's try this out. I will go ahead and sign in. Okay, clearly I forgot to add in the navigate to home screen because we didn't have a home screen. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, our data list viewer is down here, but there's no information to post. We have our date, time, personalized little greeting. Let's make our just testing, and this will be for later. Let's see. And there we go. So there's testing. Now we can't do anything right now because we didn't code it to when we clicked on it, and we'll go here and see we have the username, post title, notes, date, and time. Replies, that's going to come later. But for right now, let's go ahead and take a look. So we've got that working, and now what we want to do is make it so that we can view all this information along with the actual note, because right now we can only see the post title. So we want to be able to see all of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our data list viewer on our home screen section here, and we're going to make it so that when we click on an item, when data viewer list title click, or actually we can make it a little bit more open-ended, and when item click, we're going to go ahead and get cell. We're going to get all this information and assign it to our 5 variables here that we are then going to make it into another screen, which we're going to call the message detail screen, which is what we're going to move to. To set up this interface here, fairly straightforward. We'll have a few labels. We'll throw in one for the date, one for the time, one for the post title, one for the username, one for the message, and then that's it for right now. Let's go back and let's code this. So when data viewer list item click, we're going to go back here and we are going to get all this information from the error table and assign it to the variable so that it will be able to reflect on the next screen. So we're going to go here to our error table, and we're going to be getting a lot of cells, 5 of them. Row ID is going to go ahead and be this guy right here, because again it's going to be formatted in the same format. It's going to show the data in the same format that is how it's structured on the table in Airtable. Column name, we're going to be looking at notes here, and we are going to set the variable message to the value that it pulls there, and we're going to nest a few things up in here. It's going to be a nice long block, and we're going to keep doing this. And as you can see, we now have this thing, data sources. Sometimes this shows up when you have the data viewer list included in there. Makes it a little bit easier. It's the same thing. You can get values. It's the same thing as get cell in Airtable. Sometimes it's a little bit easier because you can see the actual columns instead of having to make the object. You can compare it. You have this. You're gonna have to create the object like that, or you can use a create row thing with the data viewer list, and it automatically has those as objects. Automatically does that part for you. But for right now, we're just going to stick with the get cell. Row ID is going to be the same here. We're going to go ahead and find the usernames column. We're going to get that value, set that as the username. Oops. Username set value. We're going to keep on doing this. And this is going to be a date, and then we're going to that doesn't change. We'll get the time. And then, last but not least, we're going to make sure we get the post title. So now we have our variables set. We have the message set to the value there, username. We have the, and we could also set this to the user ID, but we're just going to keep it consistent. So we have all this, and now once this is done, we're going to then navigate to the message details screen. Now on the message details screen, once this opens, we're going to have it coded so that it pulls all this information and lists it. So we're going to have the username. We're going to have the message label. We're going to have the time label. We're going to have the date label, and we are going to have the post title. So we're going to set this up like this. Put the time and date up top. Post title message. Space it out a little bit. And so we're going to go ahead, and once this screen opens, we're going to set our text to the variables. Just kind of doing this in a random order here. I'm going to join a couple things so it doesn't look funky. Date, so we're going to find our variables here. Date, time, message, username, and post title. Oh, and the reason, why we're using username is because these are going to be posts from other people. And so if we were to use the user ID, then it would say that every post is from the individual who logged on, which would be incorrect. So, because we're going to make sure all these variables reset once they hit the back button. So we'll set that information there. And we are going to then see if this works. So what should happen now is we should see all this information populate once we click on this. And there we go. Date posted, time posted from, post title, message, hello, I'm testing. Now obviously we're going to want to throw a back button in there. And the last thing we will look at is how to make replies. How do we make a reply on that one individual post? And so it won't show up anywhere besides that post. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Whoops, I don't want to put that there. I want to put that here. It's going to be our back button. And we're going to make sure once we click on that, that all these variables reset so that they are able to be clear for when they click on another message. So we're going to set all these variables to blank, and remember they were all text, so pretty straightforward. Username, time, date, message, post title. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and include the ability to reply. So we're going to throw in not a data viewer list, but we're going to throw in a normal list viewer right here. I'm going to put that right there. Now, in order to populate this, we're going to go ahead and add a few things to this, because again, we're going to want it to populate with information as soon as the screen opens. So we're going to go ahead and use the we have to find which row this is going to be in. So in order to do that, we have to get the column. We're going to match it up with the message. So the way I did that is went to Airtable. We're going to go ahead and get the column. We're going to get the column notes. Again, that should be technically called messages, but right there it's called notes. Remember, set the max number of rows to infinity, because there should not be a limit on that. I'll go ahead, pop that in there, and then we're going to initialize a couple variables here for our replies. We're going to initialize one as the message list, kind of similar to how we were finding what row the username was in the sign-in screen. This is going to be a blank list here, empty list. We're going to initialize one more here. We're going to have to do another index thing, again similar to what we did with the sign-in. We'll do message ID index, and then we will actually have to do the message itself. Message. And that will be a blank text. Or wait, no, sorry, we already did that. This is going to be the reply list, because we're going to be looking in two columns. So that will be an empty list there. So those are our variables set up for our replies. And so what we're going to do here is then we're going to populate our message list with the column. Message list, populate that. Again, we're going to add in an if do. This should always be, there should always, if we're grabbing the information, this should always show up, so it should always be true. But more advanced, you can mess around with that, add an else to throw an error if it's not true. Again, we're going to do the same process we did with the sign-in screen. We're going to make sure that this list contains the message that we're looking for. That variable message list, does it contain the message? That's going to be our app variable message here. And if that is true, then we're going to proceed. And we're going to set the app variable index to the index that it returns. Where's the find first occurrence? And then we'll be able to set the list viewer. Where's that? List viewer here. And we're going to set the text items to the replies. So there's going to be stuff in here. We're going to want to set that list to the replies for this specific post in this row. In order to do that, we're going to have to make a list from the text, because obviously this column is going to be not a list, it's going to be a text. And so you're probably wondering how we're going to make lists from that. Well, we got to do this. Make list from text. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in here to our Airtable, or excuse me, we're going to actually go into our data sources. We're going to get the value. This is where this data sources comes in handy. Get the value, table 1, again, that's our messages, and we're going to go to the replies for row ID. That's going to be our message index that we found, message ID index, with delimiter with the comma. So all the replies are going to be in this one column, one row, but they're going to be separated with a comma so that you'll be able to differentiate between, and it'll make a list from that. So that should do it. And to make sure that the comma is going to be in there without having users to put that in, we'll add in a separate button to actually populate the field with replies. And to do that, we'll want to throw in a text input, so you can type your reply, and a post button. So when you hit the reply button, we're going to, first of all, we don't want this populating with a bunch of blank stuff, otherwise the list viewer will get all ugly. And so if the field is empty, make sure it throws an error. Throw in another alert. Because you don't want that to go through if it's blank. Then we're going to go to our data sources. We're going to update the value in our replies. For row ID, again, that is going to be our message ID index to the value of the we're going to do a couple things, because again, we want to add in the comma, right? We could just add in the get text, but the problem with that is then it's going to erase everything that was in here previously. So we want to make sure it takes the replies, what's in there already, and then adds on to it, and then also adds in a comma as well as a from thing, so that you know who is posting what. So to do that, we're going to do a join. We're going to add in a few fields. I think we'll add in 5. First thing we want to do is, again, we want to add on to what was previously in there. So we're going to have to make text from list. We're going to have to switch this around. Make text from list. Go into our list viewer, get the text items. So it's going to pull what's already in the replies, make text from it. And it's going to separate them with a comma. We're going to go here, add in a from, get our variable for the user ID. Remember, the thing that's been good and saved since we logged in. And then from the reply text input, let's see. Well, I don't want to add in one more thing, because we want to make sure that it adds a comma afterwards. Because remember, that's what we're using to separate the text into a list, and then vice versa. And then we're good to go. And a nice thing to do is like to add in another alert so that we know everything went through. Now the thing with this is, because it's a list viewer and not a data list viewer, it's not going to be updated in real time, and that is the initial problem that we were running into. It's going to be there once you restart the app, but for some reason that I have not been able to figure out yet, it doesn't update in real time. So the replies, they work, but you're going to have to sign in and out of the app to see them. But again, let's make sure everything is good here. Then we can go ahead and test this out. Just doing some cosmetic stuff here. And blank this out. If they want to stay on the page, it'll blank it out. And last thing, okay, we got the back button coded and everything like that, and because we added these few variables, we're going to also want to reset those. We're going to want to make sure message list goes back to being an empty list. We're going to want to make sure the ID index goes back to being 0. Add variable reply list goes back to being empty as well. And so that should be good. Now you have something that can pull the information from the messages as well as show you the replies. So let's see if we can't get it to populate with some replies. Let's see here. Let's just go. Okay, let's give it a go. So let's go to our sign-in screen. So we have our post here, and there's the replies. Hey, hi, how are you? Let's see if this works. Sorry. I think I made the wrong one show. Whoops. But we can go in here, and there we go, from Steven0118. Hello. Yeah, I'm not sure. I must have typed that wrong. Yeah, so reply, confirm, reply alert, there we go. So that works, and now you can go back in one more time to see that it populated. And there we go, from Steven01, right? Hey, hello. Now the problem with this is when the messages get too long, you'll have to incorporate another layer to it if you want to click on a list from the item, and it'll go to another screen in which you can view the entire message. Otherwise, it's going to get cut off right about here. Go back and make sure this is still working. And live update there. And there we go. And the list of replies is empty right now. There we go. And here we go, and it also has the reply on there. Again, this is updating in real time. It's just a matter of when it's not the data list viewer, it's gonna, until I find out a way to make that update more immediately, you're gonna have to restart the app to see your replies. Other than that, I think there's a couple other things you can do, adding the sign out button up top, which would look like this. This is basically how it looks when it's a little bit better designed. Whoops. So on your home screen, you have this. You have sign out settings. You can do a constant refresh to make sure that the data viewer list is refreshing all the time. And sign out, again, this will take you back to the sign in, and it'll reset the user ID and everything else like that to a fresh variable. Sign out label, set user ID to blank, set all that, and then go back to the sign in. So yeah, I hope this helped.